That would make Gene Roddenberry turn in his grave.
In what's being described as one of the most dramatic confrontations in entertainment history, the original cast of Star Trek, led by William Shatner himself, reportedly stormed into a meeting with Paramount Global CEO Brian Robbins and delivered a profanity-laced ultimatum about the direction of the franchise. And according to multiple sources who claim to have witnessed or been briefed on the meeting, the confrontation was so intense, so brutally honest, and so filled with anger from legendary actors who have had enough, that it left Paramount executives shaken and forced immediate action on the Starfleet Academy disaster. The meeting allegedly took place at Paramount's headquarters, and it wasn't a scheduled diplomatic discussion. It was a confrontation that the original series cast demanded after watching Starfleet Academy destroy the franchise they created nearly 60 years ago. William Shatner, George Takei, Walter Koenig, and others from the legendary crew that started it, all allegedly marched into the CEO's office with a clear message: stop the woke shit, fix Star Trek immediately, or we go public with exactly why the franchise is dying and who's responsible. This is absolutely unprecedented. We're talking about actors in their 80s and 90s, legends who rarely involve themselves in corporate politics or publicly attack studios, becoming so frustrated and angry about what's happened to Star Trek that they took the extraordinary step of directly confronting Paramount's CEO. The fact that they used profanity, that they were reportedly shouting at times, and that they delivered ultimatums rather than suggestions shows just how serious the crisis has become. Let's break down exactly what happened in this explosive meeting, what the original series cast specifically demanded from Paramount's CEO, how Brian Robbins responded, and what this confrontation means for the immediate future of Star Trek. According to sources with knowledge of the meeting, it was William Shatner who organized and led the confrontation. Despite being 93 years old, Shatner apparently decided that he couldn't stay silent any longer while watching the franchise he helped create being destroyed by incompetent leadership and misguided creative decisions. Shatner allegedly spent weeks coordinating with other original series cast members, building a united front, and preparing specific examples and demands to present to Paramount's leadership. The group that confronted CEO Brian Robbins reportedly included William Shatner, George Takei, Walter Koenig, and potentially one or two other original series veterans. These are the surviving members of the crew that made Star Trek a cultural phenomenon in the 1960s, that fought to keep the show on the air when it faced cancellation, and that returned for movies in the 70s and 80s that revived the franchise. Their collective credibility and legacy give them moral authority that Paramount couldn't easily dismiss. The meeting was reportedly arranged through persistent pressure from the actors' representatives, with Shatner making it clear that if Paramount's CEO refused to meet with them, they would hold a press conference and publicly explain why Star Trek is failing and who's responsible. Faced with that threat, Brian Robbins allegedly agreed to meet with the original series cast, though he apparently didn't expect the confrontation to be as intense as it turned out to be. According to witnesses and people briefed on what happened, William Shatner opened the meeting by thanking Robbins for his time and then immediately launching into a blistering critique of how Paramount has mismanaged Star Trek. Shatner allegedly said something like, "Mr. Robbins, we're here because Star Trek is dying. The franchise that Gene Roddenberry created, that we spent our lives building, that has meant so much to millions of people around the world, is being destroyed. And we're here to tell you directly. Stop the woke shit, fix the quality problems, and get back to making real Star Trek. Or we're going to make it very clear to the world that Paramount killed one of the greatest franchises in entertainment history." The bluntness and profanity of Shatner's opening reportedly shocked everyone in the room. This wasn't the diplomatic approach of actors trying to maintain relationships with a studio. This was a frontal assault from people who felt they had nothing to lose and everything to fight for. Brian Robbins allegedly tried to respond by defending Paramount's approach, saying that modern Star Trek is reaching new audiences, that the franchise is evolving with changing times, and that shows like Starfleet Academy represent Paramount's commitment to diversity and contemporary storytelling. But according to sources, the original series cast wasn't having any of it. George Takei, who has spent decades as an outspoken progressive advocate and LGBTQ activist, allegedly cut Robbins off and said something like, Don't you dare lecture us about diversity and representation. We broke barriers in the 1960s when it actually cost something to do so. We showed a black woman, an Asian man, and a Russian working together as equals when that was revolutionary. But we did it through good storytelling, through characters who were competent professionals first and diverse second. What you're doing with Starfleet Academy isn't representation, it's tokenism. You're checking boxes and delivering political lectures instead of making good television. Takei's criticism is particularly significant because it comes from someone with impeccable progressive credentials. When a gay Asian man who has been a civil rights advocate for decades tells you that your diversity efforts are actually tokenism and bad representation. That's criticism that can't be dismissed as coming from bigots or people opposed to inclusion. Walter Koenig allegedly piled on, addressing the specific creative failures of Starfleet Academy. According to sources, Koenig said, "I watched Starfleet Academy because I wanted to support Star Trek. I couldn't finish the first episode. The writing was terrible. The characters were one-dimensional identity categories instead of people. Every scene felt like a lecture. There was no sense of wonder, no exploration, no optimism about the future. It was just contemporary politics with Star Trek uniforms. That's not Star Trek. That's an insult to everything we built." The original series cast allegedly came prepared with specific data about Starfleet Academy's failure: viewership numbers, audience scores, critical reviews, social media sentiment. They showed Robbins evidence that the show had failed commercially and critically, that it had alienated longtime fans without attracting significant new audiences, and that it was actively damaging the Star Trek brand. According to witnesses, Shatner then delivered what sources describe as the most powerful and emotional part of the confrontation. He allegedly spoke about what Star Trek has meant to him personally, about how he and the original series cast devoted their lives to building something meaningful, about the letters they received from fans over the decades describing how Star Trek inspired them to become scientists, engineers, doctors, and astronauts. Shatner reportedly said, "We didn't make Star Trek for money or fame. We made it because we believed in Gene's vision of a better future, of humanity overcoming its worst impulses and reaching for the stars. We fought to keep that show alive when the network wanted to cancel it. We came back for movies when the franchise needed reviving. We've been Star Trek's ambassadors for 60 years. And now we're watching you destroy everything we built by prioritizing political messaging over quality, by making shows that divide people instead of uniting them, by using the Star Trek name to push agendas instead of to inspire people," Shatner allegedly continued. "Starfleet Academy is a disgrace. It's bad television that happens to use the Star Trek name. And the fact that you greenlit it, that you put resources behind it, that you're defending it even now after it's clearly failed, tells us that you don't understand Star Trek, and you don't deserve to control this franchise." The emotional intensity of Shatner's speech apparently silenced the room. Brian Robbins and the other Paramount executives present had no immediate response to hearing Captain Kirk, the face of Star Trek for most of the world, say that they're destroying the franchise. But then came the ultimatum and the specific demands. According to sources, the original series cast laid out exactly what they wanted Paramount to do. First, immediately cancel Starfleet Academy and acknowledge publicly that the show didn't meet quality standards. No vague corporate speak about strategic decisions, an actual admission that the show failed because it prioritized politics over storytelling. Second, fire or reassign the creative leadership responsible for Starfleet Academy and for the broader direction of Star Trek content. The cast allegedly didn't name specific individuals, but made clear they wanted accountability for the people who approved and executed the creative approach that has alienated fans and damaged the brand. Third, bring in new creative leadership with a mandate to return Star Trek to its roots. Optimistic, thoughtful science fiction that explores ideas through allegory and respects the audience's intelligence while still being diverse and inclusive in ways that feel natural rather than forced. Fourth, consult with Star Trek veterans, actors, writers, and other creative people from previous series in developing future projects. Give people who understand Star Trek actual authority rather than just token involvement. Fifth, commit to quality over quantity. Stop churning out multiple Star Trek shows simultaneously and instead focus on making fewer shows that are actually good. Sixth, Stop dismissing criticism of Star Trek content as toxic fandom or bigotry. Acknowledge that there are legitimate quality concerns, and that fans who criticize modern Trek aren't automatically racists or sexists. According to witnesses, Shatner concluded the list of demands by saying, "If you do these things, if you actually make meaningful changes and demonstrate that you understand what went wrong, then we'll support you. We'll help however we can. We'll speak positively about Star Trek's future. But if you don't, if you try to spin this or make superficial changes while continuing the same basic approach, then we're going public. We'll do interviews, we'll explain in detail why Star Trek is failing and who's responsible, and we won't be diplomatic or polite. We'll tell the truth." Brian Robbins' response to this confrontation reportedly evolved over the course of the meeting. At first, according to sources, he tried to defend Paramount's decisions and push back against the criticism. But as the original series cast systematically dismantled every defense and made clear they weren't backing down, Robbins apparently realized he was facing a genuine crisis that required immediate action. The turning point allegedly came when Robbins asked what would happen if Paramount didn't meet their demands, and Shatner responded, "Then Captain Kirk, Sulu, and Chekhov hold a press conference and tell the world that Paramount killed Star Trek. We explain exactly what you did wrong and why the franchise is dying, and we make it clear that we can't be associated with what Star Trek has become. You think the backlash has been bad so far? Wait until we go public. The brand damage will be catastrophic and permanent." That threat apparently made the stakes crystal clear. Paramount couldn't afford to have Star Trek's most iconic actors publicly declaring that the company destroyed the franchise. The financial and reputational damage would be enormous, affecting not just Star Trek, but Paramount's overall brand value. According to sources, Robbins asked for time to discuss the situation with his leadership team and to consider what changes could realistically be made. The original series cast agreed to give him 72 hours before going public, but made clear that they expected real action, not just promises. The meeting reportedly ended with tension, but also with a sense that maybe Paramount finally understood the severity of the situation. As the original series cast left, Shatner allegedly turned back and said one final thing to Robbins: "We're not asking for much. We're just asking you to stop the woke shit, make quality television, and respect the franchise we spent our lives building. If you can't do that, you have no business controlling Star Trek." What happened in the 72 hours after that confrontation was reportedly a full-scale crisis management operation at Paramount. Brian Robbins held emergency meetings with executives, reviewed all available data on Star Trek's performance and reception, consulted with consultants and analysts about options, and ultimately concluded that the original series cast was right. Starfleet Academy and the broader creative approach to Star Trek had failed, and fundamental changes were necessary. The decision to cancel Starfleet Academy came directly from these emergency meetings, with Robbins and other top executives concluding that they couldn't defend the show, and that canceling it would demonstrate to the original series cast that Paramount was serious about change. The cancellation was announced within the 72-hour deadline, though the public statement didn't reveal the confrontation or ultimatum that had triggered it. But according to insiders, the changes go beyond just canceling one show. Paramount is reportedly making moves to restructure how Star Trek content is developed and approved, bringing in new voices with different perspectives on what Star Trek should be. There are discussions about offering consulting roles to Star Trek veterans who understand the franchise's legacy and can guide new projects. Most significantly, there's reportedly a shift in the corporate attitude toward criticism of Star Trek content. Instead of dismissing all negative feedback as toxic fandom, Paramount is apparently acknowledging that there are legitimate quality concerns, and that the political messaging in recent shows has been too heavy-handed and alienating. The original series cast has been informed of these initial changes and is reportedly cautiously optimistic, but maintaining their threat to go public if the changes prove superficial or temporary. They want to see evidence over time that Paramount has genuinely learned from the Starfleet Academy disaster and that future Star Trek content will be different. The reaction to news of this confrontation, which has leaked through various industry sources even though Paramount tried to keep it quiet, has been enormous. Star Trek fans are celebrating the fact that Shatner, Takei, and Koenig stood up for the franchise and forced Paramount to listen. Social media is filled with posts praising the original series cast as heroes who saved Star Trek from complete destruction. The phrase, "stop the woke shit," has become a rallying cry for fans who feel that modern Star Trek has prioritized political messaging over quality. Progressive fans are more conflicted, with some supporting the original series cast's call for better storytelling, while others are concerned about the language and framing being used. Industry observers are focused on the unprecedented nature of a CEO being confronted by legendary actors who delivered profane ultimatums. This kind of direct confrontation is extremely rare, and it demonstrates how serious the Star Trek crisis had become that it required this level of dramatic intervention. The broader implications for how studios handle franchise content are significant. If Star Trek's problems were caused by prioritizing political messaging over quality storytelling, other franchises might face similar issues. The original series cast's successful rebellion could embolden talent from other franchises to push back against creative approaches they believe are damaging. For Star Trek specifically, this confrontation represents a potential turning point. The franchise now has a chance to course correct, to learn from its mistakes, and to return to what made it successful. But that will only happen if Paramount follows through on the changes they've promised, and if the lessons of the Starfleet Academy disaster are genuinely learned rather than just superficially acknowledged. William Shatner, George Takei, and Walter Koenig's decision to confront Paramount's CEO and deliver the "stop the woke shit" ultimatum will be remembered as one of the most dramatic moments in Star Trek's 60-year history. These legendary actors in their 80s and 90s stood up for the franchise they created and refused to let it die quietly. They risked their relationships with Paramount. They used language that was deliberately provocative and controversial. And they forced a confrontation that the studio couldn't ignore or spin away. Whether this saves Star Trek or whether it's just a temporary pause in the franchise's decline remains to be seen. But the original series cast has done everything they can to sound the alarm and force change. They've given Paramount a roadmap for fixing Star Trek and a deadline for proving the changes are real. Now it's up to Paramount to decide whether they're actually going to listen to the people who built Star Trek, or whether they're going to keep making the same mistakes until there's nothing left of the franchise but a name that nobody trusts anymore. One thing is certain: Captain Kirk, Sulu, and Chekhov storming into the CEO's office and telling him to stop the woke shit is the most Star Trek thing the original series cast has done in decades. They saw a problem, they confronted it directly. They spoke truth to power, and they fought for what they believed in. That's exactly what their characters would have done on the show. And if Paramount is smart, they'll recognize that when your franchise's greatest legends are willing to burn bridges and risk everything to save it, you should probably listen to what they're saying.